Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, and I'm here today with attorney Stephen Jessup, and we're going to talk about a fairly critical issue for dentists and long-term disability insurance claims, which is that a dentist can continue working and collect disability insurance benefits. And Stephen, we've helped hundreds of dentists throughout the country to seek long-term disability insurance benefits as well as business overhead disability benefits. But I want to talk in this video about some of the strategies when seeking long-term disability benefits for a dentist, which will give them the best chance to get the benefits approved. And even some of the dentists who are on claim and thinking about how to transition possibly out of their practice and maybe going from what is a residual to total disability. So a lot of what we're going to talk about in this video is the term in a disability policy of residual disability and also total disability. So let's make sure first that the dentists understand the difference between total and residual disability. So if you can first go through that, and of course with the caveat that it's not always the same definition in every policy, but clarify what that is, and then we'll dig into some details as to how to best move forward with a claim.
Yeah, so generically speaking, for total disability, it's going to be language along the lines of, due to your, sickness, injury, whatever, you were unable to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation. I mean, you are not working as a dentist at that point. Partial disability or residual disability in its simplest form, you are performing some of the material and substantial duties of your occupation, or you're prevented from performing some of them, and you have a loss of income. Generally, you have to have at least a 20% loss of income. So in the total disability, it's that. You're not working at all. Partial, you are still working in the occupation. That's the most general way to look at it. And then depending on your policy language, your total disability definition may be purely occupation specific, which would allow you to work in a completely different other field. Like say, for instance, I have clients who then went on to teach at dental schools. They're not practicing anymore and be able to still collect the benefit. So you're either not working or you're working in a reduced capacity.
All right, so let's first talk about some scenarios where a dentist could be totally disabled and still maintain their practice. Because the dental industry is evolving now. We have these big group dental practices that are coming in and buying up dental groups. So the solo dental groups are out there, but they're owned by these bigger conglomerates. And often we're seeing more than one dentist in an office. So a total scenario of disability that I commonly see is that a dentist is unable to do the duties of his occupation, but he may already have other dentists working in the office. So my question for you is, in that scenario, can that dentist stop working, maintain the practice, have all these other dentists in the group, and collect total disability benefits?
Yes, depending on the language of the policy, right? So some of the policies will say that, the only thing they're going to consider for work earnings are things that are attributable to you, so the actual dental work you're doing. Some policies, as you know, will have language about if you're the owner of the business and certain, what percentage level and like income derived by the business is still attributable to you. But yes, you can. You can. And I had a client some years ago with 3 different insurance carriers, and that was it. He basically couldn't do the duties anymore. And he became like a de facto just dental office manager, if you will. He had multiple practices. He just went, showed his face, made sure things were kind of running orderly, wasn't doing any dental work, and his insurance companies were paying him a total disability benefit.
And that can be a good scenario because that dentist can kind of get out of the chair and move into more of a...
Quite honestly, buying up practices and managing them, he's making more than when he had just his own practice.
Right, and so that's certainly an option for total disability. The other thing is doing a transitional type practice where you may be a solo dentist right now and you bring in an associate and you sell the practice to them or do a transition where you pay them a salary, but over a period of time they start to acquire ownership in the practice. And as long as you as a dentist aren't working on the patients, you may be able to continue to collect total disability benefits. So that's a good scenario, assuming you're a dentist that doesn't want to give up your practice and wants to stay in that industry. And again, it's going to depend on the policy language. And of course, we'll always provide a free initial consultation and review that long-term disability policy. Let's shift gears to residual. Now, my position has always been for dentists that when initially applying, it's easier to get a residual disability claim than a total disability claim approved. And the reason that I take that position is because, like you were saying, the definition of residual disability, and it varies in every policy, it's usually you're either unable to perform one or more of the material duties of your occupation, or you can't perform them for as much time as you were performing before, which is the most liberal definition. I mean, it can be you were in for 5 days a week and now you're only 4.5 days. But it always has a loss of income component. So can't do it for as much time as you used to, but you have at least a 20% loss of income from your pre-disability income. And how is pre-disability income often defined in these policies?
They're going to take a look at, on these private policies that most dentists have, we'll just assume it's a private individual policy. A lot of times they will look at the best 22 years in the prior 3 years, or the 12 months immediately before. So there'll be a couple different ways that they'll look back to give you the benefit of the doubt of what were your highest earning potential. Right. So they will take a look back on prior years, because some people, like you say, if they've been going through this for a while, right, they may have already have a residual disability claim they could have filed. They've been losing money medically, they're just not working as much. But a lot of dentists just don't think about, they think for disability, I can't be working at all. Right. They forget they have these residual disability provisions. So in situations like that, where we're trying to figure out what the date of disability is for the loss, but then it also allows us to capture a further period to look back in time to determine what those prior earnings were. So if they maintain this residual disability, it'll show a higher percentage loss of income. So every policy will do it differently, but the insurance company, regardless, will always look at the monetary situation within the confines of the definition of pre-disability earnings that's going to be most advantageous, to the dentist.
And so just to make this because I'm a numbers guy, like to see things. So to make it easy, if a dentist was making, say, $50,000 a month, and that was their pre-disability earnings before disability, and now they go to $25,000 a month of earnings, they would have a 50% loss of income from what they used to earn. And then there would be a formula in the policy that would say, since you have a 50% loss of earnings, we're going to pay you 50% of your disability benefit. So if you had a $20,000 a month disability benefit and a 50% loss, you're going to get a $10,000 a month monthly disability benefit. That's pretty easy math. The other scenario that's good in a lot of these policies is that if you have greater than a 75 or 80%, it depends on some of the policies, loss in pre-disability income, then the disability carrier says they'll pay you your full benefit. Mm-hmm. So, if it's $40,000 a month pre-disability earnings and you have to have a 75% loss of income, that means you would go down to less than $10,000 a month of earnings. Then you could get your full disability benefit and continue to work and earn money. So those are how the numbers shake out, and it's a calculation where the carrier is going to ask for your tax returns from the prior years, your monthly P&L statements and things like that to verify the financials. And then it gets a little bit annoying moving forward because every month they're going to require a monthly P&L statement, and there's certain things that are deductible, certain things that are not deductible. There has to be certain expenses that were in play before, versus some people say, well, now I'm going to put my wife or husband on the payroll, and certain things you can and can't do. And so that's a strategy that we work through with every client to try to maximize that. But residual is nice that it allows the dentist who wants to say, I still think I can work in some capacity. I don't want to lose my practice. I mean, almost every dentist we talk to doesn't want to give it up. And they also are very nervous to say, I don't know if the disability carrier is going to approve my total disability claim. So, because once I shut the doors and my clients, patients, and the community know that I'm disabled and injured, they may not come back. The other struggle for a dentist, which is very real that we deal with all the time, is most dentists have private disability policies. And they buy these 90-day elimination periods, which means you have to be totally disabled or residually disabled for at least 90 days. Well, the dentist who now has to have this disability for 90 days is struggling in his or her practice for 90 days, plus the disability carrier doesn't pay until 30 days after, so it's really 120 days till you could possibly get a check. And what does the dentist do for income during that period? They don't know if they're going to get better. How long are they going to continue to be able to work? And yet they want to file this disability claim and try to get that income, but it's going to be 120 days out. And they don't necessarily want to shut the doors because they need to try to do something to keep the income coming in. So the real reality of the situation, which the disability carriers manipulate down the road when they get this claim on paper, is that here I am as a dentist, I have a staff, I have $30,000, $40,000 a month of payroll, I'm hurting badly, but I'm trying to work through this process, I'm trying to see what I can do, but I don't want to shut the doors. I may want to also sell the practice, and if I don't have a practice, there's so many variables, and we could just keep going on and on that we've seen, but Residual, in my opinion, gives the doctor the opportunity to start to cut back on work, start to see if the reduction in work is going to allow them to see, do they feel better? Do they not feel better? How does the reduction in work tie in also during that first 90 to 120 days with medical treatment? What do you want to see when you, in a perfect scenario, if you're presenting the claim for a dentist where their medical treatment is corresponding with a reduction in their work?
Well, ideally, you'd want to see that medical information well predating the quote-unquote date of disability, like that they were having issues and problems. I've had clients where, like you said, they don't want to give it up. So they've had years of getting updates and getting re-examinations, MRIs, things like that, to see what the other options may be. So ideally, you're going to have a history of things, and sometimes dentists, like a lot of medical professionals, aren't the best patients. They don't necessarily go to the doctor to document it. But during that time, and even leading up to notifying the insurance company, you and I, we've worked with dentists that were thinking about filing, but they weren't ready. They just wanted to explore ahead of time what their options would be, because like you said, with selling of the practice, how do they maintain payroll, all these things that kind of go into it. It's a big, heavy decision. I've had clients that decided, you know what, I just want to keep working. I don't want to deal with the disability at this time, and that's that. But making sure when they hire us ahead of that time, that you are getting to the doctor and the doctor is making recommendations in the medical records that maybe you should think about cutting back a bit. There's always this concern of patient safety. I was just at my dentist yesterday. I actually like going to the dentist. I don't mind it. But a lot of people in general are afraid of the dentist, right? They don't like it. They don't like, just the laying there, the sounds, the noises, the drilling, whatever the case may be. And then the concern of the dentist themselves, knowing they're in an atmosphere where sometimes the patient's uncomfortable, and if you're having a hard time feeling your fingers or your neck are bothering you and stuff like that, making sure that you are putting those concerns in and letting the doctor know that you do have some concerns. People, obviously it's reasonable to get worried then, well, what if my malpractice carrier finds out, right? So if the doctor's not telling you need to stop working right now, but maybe think about, like you said, dialing it back a bit. See if it alleviates the problems. It allows you to continue to work in some capacity. So as that's building, you do want to see the medical records with doctors making those recommendations for cutting back. It's a good idea to start cutting back now. Cut out one of your days and see if that'll help. Because most dentists, most of the claims we're going to see wrist-hand issues, whether it be carpal tunnel, neck issues, back issues, things like that. So they are situations where, cutting back may help alleviate some of those problems.
You mentioned something that you want to see these medical records, a history before they choose a date of disability. I see a lot of doctors who kind of deal with the issue a little bit. This is assuming it's not an accident, a car accident, they were skiing or whatever, or fell, or some freak thing that happened. A lot of dentists, they might have been suffering over the years, but they didn't go to the doctor.
Exactly.
So now we're faced with, it just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore and I went to the doctor, but they could have been suffering for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. Now, they likely were working in a consistent capacity. That doesn't help their claim because it says you were suffering or what. There's no medical documentation, number one. Number two, you had no reduction in your duties. So now you finally go to the doctor. That's okay. We have baseline day one medical treatment. We can't really start a claim before that date.
Correct.
But now, what happens after? Now you've documented it. And if you continue working at the same capacity, yes, you're a hero to yourself, you're doing good for your family, you're doing good for your patients, you're doing good for your staff, but your disability claim is going nowhere. And these claims, and this is just a nutshell, we've already been talking for 15 minutes, but this is a nutshell of the issues, but this is the heart of it. You have to start on paper making it look like your disability is affecting your ability to work. And if you want to continue being Superman and working through this pain, then the disability company is going to say, yes, you have the diagnosis, but diagnosis doesn't equal disability. And you never stopped. So the issues we always see is now the disability company says, well, it looks like you can work with this condition. And we always argue, no, I did work with it, and I got to the point where I couldn't, as you said, safely do it anymore. It was hurting myself, and it was a danger to my patients. But it's always better, in my opinion, even though you've been suffering for a while, transition down. Go from 3 days to 2 days. Go from 4 to 3. Go from 4 to 2. The next month, go 2 to 1. And then get to the point where you're just like, even though I stopped, I reduced, it didn't change. And the other thing, Stephen, is people, especially with COVID, we had a lot of dentists who were out of work. And then you know what they said? I felt great. I got back, within 2 days back in the office, I was uncomfortable again. Because for dentists, it's very physical. People don't realize. It's constantly bending over the person. It's in fixed positions. It's fine motor skills. And it's the work that's exacerbating or aggravating their condition. So yes, when they're not in work, do they have some discomfort? Yes, but being forced to see X amount of patients a day, being in that position is what is aggravating their condition.
It's one thing to endure pain when you're on your own free time. It's another while you're working. And then like you mentioned with COVID too, some of the issues were in cases I've had, and to the credit of some of the insurance companies I've worked with some of my dentist clients, where their practices had to close and my client was on residual disability. To the credit of the insurance carriers, they were paying the full disability amount. They weren't faulting them that. So, it's also one of these other things I think we also have to look at too is your loss of income for a residual disability has to be tied to the disability, not other business factors, not other things like that. And I think also too, since, in the context of dentists, we usually think about they have their own practices. Everything we're discussing deals with, if you're a dentist working for a practice, you're an employee of a practice, it's the same type of stuff that's going to go into play. And a lot of times that can be an even easier residual disability claim to make because we're not getting concerned with profit and losses. We're just dealing strictly with the earnings. Yeah, I've had a handful of dentists who sold their practices and then work for the practice, in a reduced capacity.
But a lot of those dentists sold the practice because they weren't necessarily even treating. They knew they were having some medical issues.
They wanted to be able to sell the practice while it still had some value before they lost too many patients.
That's the reality. And so we deal with that strong reality every day that, okay, I see that my medical condition is deteriorating, I can't do my job, but I spent my life building this practice, or I spent however long, I want to sell it while it's good. It's a daily issue for us with the dentist. So if you're a dentist with a long-term disability insurance policy, feel free to contact Stephen, myself, any of our disability lawyers. We would love to discuss your claim with you. It would be most important for you to email us a copy of your long-term disability policy. We'll get on the phone, provide you a free initial consultation. It's always great to plan ahead for this situation, and of course we help people if you're already on claim and you're having a problem or you've been denied. We've seen basically every single scenario that could possibly take place for a dentist with long-term disability. Our clients are located all over the country and we can help you no matter where you live. We encourage you to check out our website, look for additional information about your particular company, and we want you to really be educated, as you can see, about this process, because the more educated you are, the better position you're going to be in to get your claim approved. So if we can help you in the future, we encourage you to contact us, and we look forward to the opportunity to speak with you.